In this video, I shall be analyzing a game played between two Indian superstars, the world champion Domraju Gukesh and the highest rated player Arjun Erigaisi. The game was played in the final round of the TATA Steel Masters Chess Tournament, and Gukesh needed a draw to clinch the title. Unfortunately, he lost this game and he was tied along with another Indian superstar, Pragyananda. Gukesh had to play a tiebreaker with Pragyananda, and in the tiebreaker, Pragyananda managed to win, and finally, Pragyananda was the winner of one of the most prestigious tournaments in chess calendar, the TATA Steel Masters, which can be compared to Wimbledon of tennis. So let's see how the games proceeded. It was Gukesh white and Arjun Erigaisi was playing with black. Gukesh started with e4, Arjun replied e5. White played knight f3, Arjun played knight f6, the Russian defense or the Petrov defense. Well, the move knight f6 looks like black is copying white's moves, but it has the reputation of being a very solid defensive plan for black. Gukesh captured the e-pawn and black played d6, chasing away the white knight before recapturing the pawn. One of the traps which everybody should remember is black cannot recapture the pawn at once. Well, this is a very useful lesson. One cannot draw by copying the moves of opponent. So if you keep on copying the moves at a particular stage, when your opponent plays a check, you have to defend the check. You can't copy the move and play counter check. Well, after knight e4, white would play queen e2, attacking the knight. And whenever the knight moves, either directly or after d5, d3, well, in both the cases, let's say the knight goes back directly, white would play knight c6, discovered check, winning the queen. And if black plays d5, d3, and even here, when the knight goes back, white will play the same discovered check, winning the queen once again. So that is why after knight e5, d6 is played. And most players, I mean almost all the players here, prefer to play knight f3, and then black recaptures knight e4. The main line or most common move here is white seizes the center by playing d4 and black plays d5. The position looks symmetrical except black has a more advanced knight. White argues this advanced knight is more of a liability because white will develop bishop d3 and will try to undermine the support of this knight. He will play c4 later and try to get some advantage. Black argues the knight on e4 is actually beneficial to him. So we have a very lively game arising out of this position. But Gukesh, instead of going knight f3, he played knight c4, which is slightly unusual move. It's very interesting and slightly unusual. White captured knight takes e4, and now white played a very surprising move, that is queen e2, attacking the knight. Well, it looks like a beginner's move because the queen on e2 blocks the bishop's development, the diagonal of the bishop, and it seems that white is basically slowing down his own development by blocking the path of his own pieces. But actually, the move queen e2 forces black to go queen e7. So it's like both sides have played a move which are inconvenient, and later, as we shall see, that this bishop will develop from another diagonal, so the move queen e2 will not hinder the development of the bishop. Well, another move was d5, which black could have played, but in this case the move d5 would attack the knight as well as defend his own knight. White would have played d3, and after an eventual exchange of both the knights, for instance black playing bishop e6, white taking the knight, black also recapturing the knight, white will have a majority on the king side and center. So with both the pawns he can in future generate some initiative, whereas black's extra pawn on the queen side is doubled. So that is why after queen e2, Arjun played queen e7 with black. Now Gukesh went knight e3. So once again it seems that white is not following the guidelines of opening by moving the same piece many times. But actually from e3, white is threatening to jump knight d5 and get a winning position. The queen on e7 is overloaded. It is defending the e4 bishop as well as c7 pawn. So black had to go back knight f6 to prevent this threat, and white played knight c3, renewing the plan of knight d5. Black played bishop e6, developing and defending. And here white played g3. So the move queen e2 after all didn't hinder the development of this bishop, because the bishop is ready to develop from g2. Well, there is an interesting move g4, which is an extended fianchetto. White still would develop his bishop from g2, but at the same time would try to push back the knight and occupy the center on d5. So this looks quite interesting, but fortunately for black, his pieces are well coordinated. He would play knight c6, and after g5 he has the surprising move. Instead of retreating, he can even go knight g4. The knight would come in front. Black is not afraid of moves like knight d5, because he can simply play queen d7, move the queen away. Now the bishop from f8 can develop, and black is getting ready to complete his development. If white goes knight b5, this looks quite dangerous, but black has a very nice defensive idea. He would simply continue his development. The king would move out of center, the bishop on e6 is unpinned, and now the rook would come to play. Here, if white captures the pawn, black can simply play bishop f5, and suddenly black's pieces are very active. He is threatening to go a6, attacking the knight, the b5 knight, and capturing one of the knights. So white would have to come back knight d5, and after rook e8, black has a very good compensation for the pawn sacrificed. Okay, the game might proceed. I mean, white has to come back knight e3 because black was attacking the queen, and black would continue with d5 type moves. After d4, black can chase away the defender of d pawn and capture on d4. If white plays c3, stopping d4, then black can play knight e5 and play on the newly created weakness on d3. The knight can jump to d3, next move. So these are the type of counter attack which black would have developed had white played g4. The position is unconventional, so both players have to tread very carefully. White played a more cautious move, g3. Here Arjun played knight c6 and white played bishop g2. Well, in this position, black can think of castling on the queen side, but then bishop c6 would damage the pawn's structure in front of black's king. So that would give white some chances of attacking the king. That is why black played queen d7 first, defending the knight with his queen. He can recapture, if the bishop takes on c6, he can recapture the bishop with his queen. Here white played castles and black took a bold decision. He castled on the queen side. We already see a very nice psychological dilemma. Both the players, when Arjun started with the Russian defense, it seemed white would be very happy with a simple, safe and solid position. He was playing for a draw. And then Arjun, Gukesh, he took risk of playing unconventional chess. So instead of coming back knight f3, we have seen Gukesh play knight c4 and placed his knight to e3, creating a new type of position. And now Arjun sends a signal that he wants to play attacking chess. So with both the kings on opposite flank, the strategy says that the one who attacks first seizes the initiative. So here it is white to play. White played b4, a very thematic move. He is not afraid to sacrifice a pawn. He is attacking on two open lines against the king. Well, if we move one move back, after queen d7, before both sides had castled, 8 years ago, in the same tournament, in the same village of Weijk Aan Zee, a player by the name of Richard Rapport played the same position with white against the Chinese superstar Ye, and he played the move b4, but before both sides had castled. So this was a move this was a new move at that time, and 8 years later we have the same position with both players castling on the opposite side, and then the world champion Gukesh playing b4 in this position. Well, the point is black can capture on b4, but then white will have access to an open line in front of black's king. The bishop on g2 is dangerous. The knight cannot go back to c6 because white will then play queen b5, and already it's game over. White is threatening a checkmate on b7, and if black defends b6, white can capture the c6 knight with his bishop, knight up, as well as threatening queen a6, queen b7 checkmate. So that would be winning for white. However, black still has defense. Instead of going back knight c6, he can play d5, protecting his knight with his bishop. And the position is quite unclear. White is a pawn down, but the pawn on d5 is the key to black's defense because it shuts off the bishop on g2 from attacking black's king, and also it takes away the important square g5 from both white's knights. So black can hang on to this position, but he has to face attack by white. White is a pawn down. So this is a position where white has compensation for the pawn, but there is nothing clear cut. But Gukesh, instead of accepting the pawn, he went on to attack right away by playing d5. Sorry, it's Arjun playing black. Arjun played d5. His idea is to go d4 and fork both knights. White played b5, attacking the knight. And here Arjun went knight a5, which is already a very interesting move. He could have retreated to e7, keeping the knight in the center, but he moves his knight to the edge because now he is threatening to go d4. White will be forced to go d4, and now this knight can emerge suddenly from c4, which is a strong square for this knight. So very interesting decisions by both sides. The players, although here Gukesh would have been happy with the draw because he had an excellent chance of winning the tournament, but he still is taking risk and going for a win. And the same applies for Arjun. In this position, both sides have castled on the opposite flank. Both sides are trying to attack the opponent king. Arjun played bishop h3. A very nice move trying to get rid of this bishop. This bishop puts pressure on d5 pawn, and without this d pawn, the bishop suddenly can attack black's king. For example, white cannot go knight c4, black cannot go knight c4 immediately, because in this case, white will first exchange on c4 and play d5 thanks to the g2 bishop. And well, when the bishop moves, white can capture the c4 pawn. And if black decides to take the pawn, white can exchange on d5 and pin the bishop, forcing white to weaken his own king position, because here black's king is very vulnerable and white can easily attack with his pieces. So this was one of the reasons why instead of playing moves like knight c4, black went bishop h3, trying to get rid of this dangerous bishop. Now this is a very important position, and I feel this is where the most important decision was taken in the game. You can pause the video and try to find the best move for white here. Well, white played bishop h3. He exchanged the bishop. Basically, he brought the queen from d7 to h3 so that the d5 pawn is slightly vulnerable. It can be attacked with 3 pieces. Black's queen is not defending the d5. Now, instead of bishop h3, there were 2 moves which would have helped white to maintain some advantage. The first move is white can simply move his rook away to d1 with the intention of moving the bishop, avoiding the exchange with black's bishop. Now if black exchanges right now and tries to attack white's king side, see, the moment white had played g3, the move h5 becomes a possibility, because after h4, white can open the h line for his rook. So in this position, white can block black's h pawn by playing h4 himself. And this position is slightly better for white, because black's attack has come to standstill, and white can improve his position by playing moves like queen f3, knight f5. This bishop can develop and he can gradually take over the position. So rook d1 would have been slightly better for white, and there was even more interesting move in this position. That is, white could have sacrificed an exchange by playing bishop f3. So this was a brilliant idea by white, which unfortunately the world champion missed. After bishop f3, white's idea is simply to preserve this bishop so that it can attack black's king. Black may capture the rook on f1, so black is an exchanger. A rook is obviously much more important than a bishop, but after the exchange, white will argue that his bishop on f3 is much more useful than black's rook on h8. And a possible way how the game can proceed, because white is now threatening to take on d5. The d5 pawn is attacked by 3 pieces. So black can play queen e6, supporting d5 with 3 pieces. And white can still capture on d5. This is a very important combination which one should spot. Knight d5. The idea is, if black takes knight d5, white can pin the queen and win the game. Well, the bishop is attacking the queen. The queen cannot move because the king is on c8. And if black plays f5, white can still capture f5 with his bishop, supported by the knight. So that is the idea behind capturing knight d5. White has the move bishop g4. If black plays rook d5, this is the best move, then white can actually take knight d5, knight d5. White is a piece down for just a pawn. But thanks to white's f3 bishop, first he will play bishop d2, attacking the knight. Black will be forced to go b6, and after c4, white will have raging bishops. The knight will go back, and now white can play c5, opening up lines against black king. Although black is a piece up, this is a position where although one side is a piece up and there is nothing happening immediately, but in long run white's position is much easier to play. For instance, black centralizing his knight would be met by a move like bishop f4 with the idea rook c1, attacking the knight and then lining up the rook and these two bishops against the black king. Okay, white can play cb6 at the right moment and suddenly he will have a winning attack. Note that in this position black cannot play knight d5. It looks attractive because queen c4 at once can be replied by knight f4, and suddenly black is doing good. He is a piece up. He has defended his position. But white can play rook e1 first, attacking the queen, and when the queen moves, we can take back the piece with a winning position. So this is how white should have attacked. He should have played bishop f3, although it's very difficult to spot, but logically white's bishop on f3 is actually much more useful than a rook on h8. And since both sides have a castle on the opposite flank, most likely these type of positions will not last till endgame, but in the middle game one side will find initiative and win the game. So here Gukesh took bishop h3. When black took queen h3, Gukesh went queen f3, attacking the d5 pawn. Black went h5. Now this is the point where Arjun is at his best. He sacrifices the pawn for attacking his opponent's king. Here Gukesh made a big mistake for which he will feel for rest of his career. He could have won the Tata Steel tournament by playing a move like queen f5, exchanging the queen and playing for an end game where he had excellent chance of equalizing. Since black's attack without the queen will not be effective, so this was a safe choice for white to go into the end game, and a draw would have been sufficient for him to win the tournament. But he was not aware that his rival Pragyananda was losing to Vincent Keimer, and probably that was the reason why he decided to accept the challenge. He took knight takes d5. So now white is a pawn up. Black went h4, opening the h line against white's king. Now white took knight f6. He could have played knight f4, attacking the queen, but then the queen would have retreated to f5. And basically, black would be threatening a move like g5. The knight is pinned. Black is also threatening queen c2. And his attack on the king, on the h file against white's king continues. So knight f4 would not help white much. So he took knight f6. After g f6, now black has two lines opened against white's king. Black has excellent chances to attack and checkmate white king. White is a pawn up. White went rook d1. He could have gone queen g2, offering to trade queens, which black would have avoided by playing queen f5. But probably this was a better defense for white than what was played by white. Rook d1. Black played hg. Okay, one of the reasons why rook d1 was played is that white wants to recapture with the h pawn, and there is no queen h2 checkmate. Okay, had the rook been on f1, black would have checkmated white on queen h2. So here black decided to bring his knight from the edge towards the scene of action, towards the king side. So he played knight c4, and in this position Gukesh made the final blunder for which he lost. He played a very normal looking move, that is bishop f4, developing his last piece, connecting the rooks, and most importantly planning to play g4 at some point so that the bishop can defend against h2 weakness. White might have played queen g2 and given chance would have gone g4. So that was white's idea, but with black to play, Arjun found a brilliant resource. It is black to move. You may pause the video for some time and decide what you would have played in this position. Black played a very simple move, that is bishop h6. Well, he is offering to trade the bishops. In fact, black is threatening to take the bishop, forcing white to take back with the queen, after which black would play queen h1 checkmate. So first black is threatening to take the bishop on f4. White has to take back with the queen, because if he takes back with the pawn, then the queen is hanging. Also, black can checkmate white by playing rook g8 check. So black is threatening bishop f4. So white had to play bishop h4. After bishop h6, rook h6, black has the plan of tripling on the h file and attacking a hapless king. Here white played queen g2, trying desperately to get rid of the queens. Obviously, Arjun would preserve his attacking queen. He played queen h5. White played rook b1. He wants to bring up his rook into attack. Black went rook h8, tripling on the h file. White played rook b4, attacking the knight. Instead of retreating, the knight went up to a3, attacking the c2 pawn. The trick is, if white plays the most natural move, that is rook a4, black has a very nice combination, that is he can go knight b5, removing the defender of d1. So if white plays knight b5 for instance, black can simply play queen d1 check, and the game is over. So that is why after knight a3, in this lost position, Gukesh tried desperately. He played b6. Black played cb6, and now white played rook to a4, attacking the knight. Black went knight b5 with the familiar tactics. Again, knight b5 would be met by queen d1 check. So white played rook d3, and the idea behind b6 pawn sacrifice is evident, because here when black takes knight c3, white takes back with the rook, and now it's a check. Imagine the pawn was on c7. In this position, black would have played queen d1 check. But now first he has to defend against the check. And now black played a very nice move. He played king to d8, which is slightly paradoxical at first sight. King moving towards the center. Well, this is more natural, but that would allow white to play g4. And if black is careless, white can make a comeback. He's threatening, well, the move g4 firstly closes this diagonal, and also it threatens queen g3 check, harassing the opponent's king. For example, if black plays queen b5 type move, white would go queen g3 check, king b8, and white can even play, before black does queen b1, white can even play rook a7 check, king a7, rook a3 check. The king can't escape because of the queen on g3. So black would be forced to give up his queen, and white can try to draw this endgame, queen against two rooks. So that would have been white's plan had black played king b8. But Arjun, very strong in tactics, he played the paradoxical move king d8. King towards the center, but there is no check. Here white played f3, blocking the diagonal of the queen, and black played he put the final nail in the coffin by playing queen b5, attacking the rook and threatening queen b1, deadly check. White took rook a7, black played rook h1. The point is that if white captures the rook with the intention of taking two rooks for a queen, which is a good deal, but black will not allow that because he has the move queen b1 check, and then he will take the queen. So black will be winning because he has a queen against a rook. So, well, after rook h1, white played king f2, and then black simply played rook h2, winning the queen for his rook. White resigned. This game taught us that even the best players of the world, like Gukesh, can be vulnerable when they can't make right decisions. I'm sure Gukesh would have found the correct moves if it were not the last round, and if he was not sure whether he has to play for a win or draw. Because parallelly Pragyananda was playing, and probably in some positions he refused equal endgames because he was trying to play for a win. So I hope the game was entertaining and instructive. We will meet again in the next video next week with the best game or the most instructive game of the week. Goodbye and thanks for watching.